Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Welcome back to the On podcast. We've been joined here again today by Iyad el-Baghdadi. He's an academic and he's associated with the Kawakabi Foundation. There's a long history. I wouldn't want to introduce him again, but you guys know him. He's a favorite on the English platform, but now you're going to be on the main platform. By the way, we've merged the English and Urdu platform. So if you're listening to this in on the main platform, inshallah, let us know your questions for Ayad. He's an expert. He's a Palestinian in diaspora, and he's an expert on all things Al Sham. Ayad, how are you doing?
Alhamdulillah, as good as we can be under the circumstances.
It was very kind of you. I sort of put my foot in my mouth before the recording started, and I asked you, what's up and how you doing, buddy? And it sort of reminded me of the painful truth that, all we can say nowadays is Alhamdulillah, and that we can be grateful for the circumstances, but not really stable and happy and joyful. I mean, nobody at this point. I've never met a reasonable person who's not having some sort of psychological trauma or crisis at one point or the other. So there's two things that we have on hand, and they're completely interlinked and interlocked. One is the ramping up of the starvation of the Gazan people, of the people of Palestine, the shrinking idea of a West Bank and of a two-nation theory, of a two-state solution. Sorry, and on the other hand, you have a semi-autonomous, semi-sovereign, free-ish Syria, where you still have tribal and religious conflict that is being, exacerbated by the same Zionist entity, by Israel, under the garb of some fifth columnist religious minority situation. And you have a Syrian government which has this baggage of jihadism and ikhwan and what have you, and revolution and rebellion, and it still wants to posture to the Western world. And the marketing and branding for them, unfortunately, by a lot of the access, has been done as, oh well, they're just CIA. Oh well, it's all Mossad. It was Mossad all along. Didn't you know? Or it's that's the worst, and the best is, oh, they're Takfiri Wahhabis, and that somehow relegates them to be slaughtered en masse, civilians alike. So we have a very strange, set of circumstances here in Pakistan. I just want to give you the context, the lens through which the Middle East, especially the Sham region, is analyzed, is either the Saudi lens, which is the sort of the one core of the media spectrum, and the other one is the Irani security or axis of resistance security, lens. Those are the two options available from mainstream Pakistani television consumption, and the visuals that have been coming out of the recent intertribal warfare between the Druze and the Bedouin Sunni Arabs has been presented as, just another Takfiri Wahhabi Al Qaeda Daesh, take your pick, exercise in international jihadism, or whatever. So how do we unpack this as Pakistanis as really like outside observers? Pakistanis are really outside observers in the sense of we're very far removed. We don't speak the language, and we have nothing but sympathy. So we don't know how to redirect that energy and to understand and analyze the situation. Thank you.
So I mentioned this to you before, but like I grew up around Pakistanis in the United Arab Emirates. So I went to the school that I went to when I was 13 years old was basically run by Indians and Pakistanis. So like a lot of my friends where I was growing up were Pakistanis. And I ended up getting married to a Pakistani. Yeah, getting married to a Pakistani and having a child. My child is half Pakistani. I mean, I'm not with his mother anymore, but we're very close. We're friends. We're family.
MashaAllah.
So I'm very familiar with this Pakistani mentality because, and I kind of have been seeing Pakistanis commenting on my running commentary for going back 15 years from 2010 to 2011. And there's it's astounding because sometimes you feel like they are supporting. They're not aware of the context. So sometimes they're supporting both sides. So they would be, for example, supporting the Iranian axis because they show power and vigor and like resistance, etc. to the West, etc. But they would also be supporting certain groups that are also showing power, like for example, like the militants in Syria, etc., who are also showing this kind of dignity through power, through militancy, etc. And sometimes it misses them that actually these two are fighting each other. Like you're actually supporting both sides. There's also that really Pakistani conspiracy theories are the best in the world. Like really, Pakistanis are the best. They get like the Nobel Prize of conspiracy theories. More than Turkey, more than like although I know like it also gets crazy in Turkey. This is only coming from love, like I have a lot of Pakistanis in my life that I really love and respect. But you're right, because Pakistan itself has an Islamic identity. It feels psychologically like what happens in the Middle East is part of like it really, really matters to them. So they have very strong feelings about it. But at the same time, historically, when it comes to historical continuity, they are not part of the region. So there's a lot that they might be missing. So I understand that, and I understand also the dual narrative, which is maybe like either we are like almost like there's an either or a requirement to flatten the moral complexity. And the one thing I would say is that moral prioritization, like being able to say this is better, this is worse, this is more important, this is less important, it's part of our moral life. It is really just part of our moral life. If you cannot hold the picture with its full moral complexity, then there is something lacking about your ability to grapple with morality. It's totally normal for us to actually say that, yes, Hezbollah, when it fights Israel, we have a certain Israel is a genocidal state, etc., but also Hezbollah has historically committed, not just historically, until recently, committed really horrific, war crimes against the Syrian people. Was part of basically this structure that actually suppressed and destroyed Syria in the last 15 years through its decision to support to the Assad regime. In a similar sense, we can say the Houthis, for example, when they're rising up in support of Palestine and etc., blocking Israeli shipping, etc., etc. I can understand that you would look at this and you would think, oh, this is at least someone is doing something. It is genocide, and someone is doing something. But at the same time, it's not a contradiction to also say that the Houthis have been an extremely autocratic actor when it comes to inside Yemen. They've committed horrific human rights abuses. In a similar sense that, like 30 years ago, we were looking at Saddam, for example, and we're thinking, okay, Saddam actually threw some missiles at Israel, and it's like, oh, it's a big thing. It's the first time that any Arab leader tries to do that, but also Saddam was a dictator and a tyrant, and committed horrific human rights abuses. I know that there is a desire for us to find a simple moral narrative that makes it easy for us to consume this and find a side. Unfortunately, life is more complicated than that. Even if you think in your personal life, you might find a lot of these dilemmas. And it's part of being able to read the picture correctly to be able to grapple with this moral complexity. And I say that I'm not only moralizing, because I'm a strategist. So to be a strategist, you need to think, and I consider myself devout, as a Muslim. I'm a practicing Muslim. I wear this on my sleeve, even though I'm in a very, very secular country. And so for me, morality is not optional. Like, this is not optional for your moral life. It's not optional to be able to say this is wrong, this is right. But also as a strategist, you're looking at the future and thinking, how do we accomplish a historical justice in the midst of all of this, where this is a complicated region, but you also know there's a lot of trauma happening. A lot of the things that are happening now are a result of trauma that happened centuries and generations ago. These cycles are going to keep repeating, and we need to do something, whatever we can, to, we know that we are human beings and our efforts are always going to be limited. We're not gods. But at the same time, it is part of our spiritual and moral responsibility to do what we can. So this is what I would say. I mean, at least from the complexity point of view. Geopolitically, of course, it gets more complicated, and I think we'll get into it a little bit.
That was very kind of you to sympathize with the Pakistani mindset and the plight of the Pakistani people, and then to dissect it that way. It was beautiful that we have this flattening of the moral landscape, where we want to have binary heroes and villains, where Smotrich and Netanyahu and these characters are shayateen. So Ahmad al-Shara has to be like an angel, or Khamenei, or Hassan Nasrallah, or anyone. And then religious iconography, I think, also really stumps the Pakistani mind. We either fall for it full hook, or we completely reject it in the more liberal or more secular elements of Pakistani society. अस्सलाम वालेकुम। लोग बार बार एक सवाल पूछते हैं कि कौन सी बुक्स मैं शौक से पढ़ता हूँ, तो हमने ये सोचा कि इंशाल्लाह हम एक बुक क्लब बना लें जिसके अंदर माहवार हम एक किताब को कवर करें, और ये मंथली 4 क्लासेस बनेंगी इंशाल्लाह। इसके अंदर हम 12 किताबें एक साल के अंदर कवर करेंगे। एक लिस्ट है बुक्स की, मैं आपको यहाँ डिस्प्ले कर देता हूँ, और ये टेंटेटिव लिस्ट है। इसमें मैंने कुछ इकोनॉमिक्स की किताबें रखी है, कुछ पॉलिटिकल साइंस की, और कुछ थोड़ी जो नॉटी गवर्नमेंट्स की जो मिसगिविंग्स होती हैं और उनके ऊपर जो इन्वेस्टिगेटिव जर्नलिस्ट ने काम किया हुआ है। हमारी क्लासेस जो होंगी वो एंटरटेनिंग होंगी, फन होंगी, लेकिन सब्जेक्ट मैटर जो है सीरियस होगा। मैं रेकमेंड करूंगा कि आप फिजिकली ज्वाइन करें। लेकिन अगर आपको फिजिकली ज्वाइन करने में दिक्कत आती है, ना पाकिस्तान में नहीं है, आप लाहौर में नहीं है, तो उनके लिए फिर जूम की ऑप्शन अवेलेबल है, और उनको इक्वली एज मच एक्सेस मिलेगा बुक क्लब का। इनकी हम एक सेपरेट व्हाट्सएप कम्युनिटी भी बना देंगे आपकी, ताकि हम वहाँ पे नोट्स भी शेयर कर पाएं और इन बुक्स को तफसील में डिस्कस करके होपफुली वी मेक फ्रेंड्स एज वेल इंशाल्लाह। तो इसकी फीस जो मुकर्रर है आप वेबसाइट पे देख सकते हैं, यहाँ पे आपको लिंक मिल जाएगा। तो आई होप टू सी यू देयर एट द बुक क्लब inshallah. See you soon. There is a term that is becoming more and more popular, sort of Islamo-leftism. And Islamo-leftism, or leftist Islamism, whatever you want to call it, it is a term that is more often not used by right-wing extremists in Europe and America to describe the efforts of the Ikhwan al-Muslimin, or organizations of that ilk, or efforts that Iran might have made, or any of the axis of resistance might make. But it has a popular politics which we do see manifest in people like Zohran Mamdani, for example, and his wife. And then that translates down to the masses, from political civil leadership in the West or in the East, or from academics or intellectuals, commenting on social media or tweeting or making videos. So the average person is going to look at it through this binary sort of lens that the Axis was fighting Israel. It was taking its own sweet time, and you can argue all of the semantics about what strategies it was adopting, but it was fighting Israel. And then the Syrian revolution, which had been fomenting for 10-15 years, disrupted that supply chain and the supply line. And the last time you and I talked, you mentioned very beautifully that the Syrian people and the territory of Syria can't be viewed as a stepping stone for a supply chain. This is the land of millions of people. And these are their lives. They have dreams and they have autonomy, and they're not just numbers on a screen. Which, if we kill this many and if we sequester this many, then we can have a straight supply line into Israel. But the hard material reality is that the Axis has taken a hit, and the sentiments of the larger Muslim population in the East, Mawaran Nahar, in Central and South Asia and East and Southeast Asia, were tied up, at least for the last 10 years, with the Axis, and their hopes and dreams with regards to Israel and the emancipation of the Palestinian people were tied to the Axis. And you see this in the left, in the non-Muslim left as well, across Europe and America. And they too then accept the narrative, which is now being surprisingly pushed by the Axis people, that these are all just ISIS and CIA and Mossad. How do we cut through this? How do we, what are the actual on-ground realities of like me personally? I think the Axis failed to act because their policy was flawed in this long term.
This is where I would actually say that this has been the worst mistake ever made by the Iranian Axis, the Iranian regime, or the Iranian system, you can say, in the last 20 years, was supporting Assad. This was really like if they're creating a chain, he was the weakest link in the chain, and the chain already broke. In the end, if your policy, if your strategy, your grand strategy, which you absolutely need in order to win, to survive, to liberate, I know that their goal probably isn't liberations per se, but really domination. If it depends upon a weak chain and that chain breaks in a way that it cannot be repaired, then something is wrong with your strategy. Unfortunately for them, Assad was different. Assad was very materially different from their other allies in the region. So, like people say they're proxies. The word proxy is not exactly accurate over here, even though sometimes we use it as a short term because we don't want to write like an essay to explain. But all of these, whether it's the Houthis, whether the Iraqi militias, whether it's Hezbollah, etc., they are their own movements. They don't represent. They're just not just a militant group or a criminal gang. They represent a community that has existed for thousands of years. So it's a community, but a community that has become militarized, or at least a community that has supported and created the militant group to represent it in a certain way. Representation here is more in a sectarian way. It's not like they're elected. It's just that they rule. At least they claim to rule in the name of that minority. Of course, there are many Lebanese Shia who say like Hezbollah doesn't represent me. There are many Zaydis in Yemen who say like they don't represent me, etc. But like this is the structure. So I prefer to use the word allies in this conversation than proxies. But even ally is not a strong enough word because also Iran has a very, very active role.
I think codependents. They're codependents. They're not exactly proxies, but they're not independent of each other.
This is a big question because you might find and speak to other experts who would actually tell you that they're kind of independent. So, for example, Hamas, for example, did not seek permission before starting October 7th, for example.
Yeah, Hamas. I mean, but when you compare a Hamas or a PIJ, then there's a difference, right? Because there is a codependency with the PIJ as opposed to Hamas.
Even with Hezbollah, for example, there are indications right now. For example, Hezbollah we don't know still where their strategy is going to go, but there are negotiations going on with Lebanon, with the Lebanese government, with the United States, and there has been a report in Reuters that says that they actually see the size of their arsenal as a problem. Like it became a liability to them, the size of their arsenal, because it's everywhere, it's big, etc., and that they're thinking about scaling it down. But going back to the main, like we can come back to this point, but going to the main point, which is the flaw in the thinking, the strategic thinking of the Iranian regime, or the Iranian, system here, is that in order for your plan to work, you have to suppress another people. You have to stand against the liberation of another people. You have to stand with someone like Assad, who is absolutely, not only a terrible, corrupt dictator, but also someone who doesn't have any legitimacy among his people. He has lost his support. In the end, the collapse of the Assad regime was so complete that there is no chance of it being reconstituted. This is unlike, for example, Hezbollah being the decapitation strike with a lot of the upper
leadership
destroyed, etc. You can see that Hezbollah didn't end. Why? Because Hezbollah is also underneath Hezbollah is a community. There is a community.
Yeah, it has international and domestic roots that are very deep. Yeah,
there is a domestic. This is a community that is part of the region. The Assad regime was a coalition. Of course, he wasn't from the Alawite community, and they're like Alawite communities, etc. But the coalition itself broke apart to the point that the defeat of Assad is complete. Even if God forbid, the current Syrian transition would fail, and Syria, inshallah, this never happens. But if we see a situation where it kind of breaks apart, even then, the land bridge is gone. Because even then, the land bridge between Iraq and Lebanon will be populated by a lot of groups which are intensely hostile to Iran. So the ability of restarting the land bridge on scale, that's gone. And I think that Iran is changing its strategy. I think if you look at the purchases that's looking for, is for a very long time, Iran has depended upon asymmetric warfare, cheap, the ally strategy, missiles and drones, so it's denial and attrition rather than confrontation. And they haven't really built up a really strong air force. They avoided that, and they only had really, really old, I think from the Shah era, F4s and fighter jets that the Shah had.
Yes, Sukhois from Russia and Soviet Sukhois, yeah.
And what they did, they had MiGs actually, MiG-29s, etc.
Yeah, sorry, MiGs, yeah.
And so what they did is that they reverse engineered it just so that they can keep it flying, but it was nothing. It was a joke compared to what Israel has. So they never invested into it. you can see that right after the week after the war, the end of the 12-day war with Israel, they ordered an entire fleet. I think the J-10Cs, the Chengdus, Pakistan has, I think, 25 of them, 20-something, 26 of them. Iran just ordered 36. 36, and the delivery mechanism is like it's not going to pay with cash, it's going to pay with oil because it's already exports to oil. So it completely bypasses the sanctions regime. But it also ordered, the Chinese AWACS. I can't remember the name of it. I think KJ-500 or something like that. It's basically like a platform, a radar platform. It ordered 4 of those. And it ordered the Chinese surface-to-air missile system, which is again like very, very, very advanced. And these things, if you think about this, these 3 things, they cannot be used. Like if you buy them, that means you have to change doctrine. If you buy them together and you want to use them effectively, you have to change doctrine. Keep in mind that the jets, the J-10Cs, have missiles, basically air-to-air missiles, which the range is between 150 to 300 kilometers. So they can shoot down Israeli jets and tankers, like fuel tankers that refuel them, outside. Like they can shoot at them over the Gulf or over like
for example, in the conflict with India, which was the biggest air battle, dogfight since World War II, all of the fighter jets for both countries stayed within their own territories. And yeah, so exactly your point that Iran is getting itself up to fight a conflict at home, and one where they want to be able to limit their security range to maybe the Gulf, as opposed to actually physically within Iran. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. I think what they're doing really is that they're changing. So Iran has a strong industrial base and it has a strong scientific base. That's why they can sustain a nuclear program. Like like I said before, like their nuclear program is completely indigenous. And by indigenous I mean it's native. They don't need local foreign experts to do their nuclear technology. They already know the technology. They've mastered it really. Which is why it's weird about the whole thing about like you should not enrich. Iran has this kind of Iran as a nation, not only the regime, has this kind of trauma, historical trauma about not being allowed to use their own resources because the whole the British basically controlling their oil for a very long time, and then like the coup in 1953, etc. It's all about like these are our resources. Why would we not use our resources? So there is a nationalistic bent over here that goes beyond and deeper than the Iranian regime that says, who are you to tell us that we have uranium? There is uranium being dug up in Iran. It's like I described it on Twitter as like a country that grows wheat, but it's not allowed to make bread. So for them, this is part of it. So they're able to. This is the question, because for a longest time they didn't leverage high technology when it comes, like for example with their missiles. Yeah, they make their own. They make their own drones. They make their own missiles, etc. But they never actually tried to challenge Israel or the United States when it comes to air superiority. They never tried to actually. They weren't able to deny them air superiority over their skies because they thought we have a forward position. We have Hezbollah. We have what I think Netanyahu once described it as holding a gun to Israel's head. That every time you want to, we might think about attacking Iran, we have Hezbollah. So now we're completely like in September 2024, Israel takes out most of Hezbollah's leadership in the decapitation strike. So the pager attacks happened early in the month, and then later in the month you had like the wipeout, Nasrallah, and upper leadership being killed. And then in December 2024, the Assad regime collapses. And then in June 2025, you have the attack on Iran. It would be insane for the Iranian leadership to continue to think that we need to re-establish the land bridge. It can't be done. It just can't be done, and they don't have time. They know that Netanyahu already went to Trump to speak about the next round. He's already planning the next round of attacks on Iran. When is it going to be? In fact, I think there's a little bit rhetorical back and forth between Netanyahu and Trump, because Trump keeps saying, no, we obliterated everything. He's almost getting ahead of like, no, you don't need to attack again because it's not, everything is gone. If you're attacking again, you're basically saying I'm wrong, saying that it's not obliterated. But then Netanyahu keeps saying that, like, what is the condition upon which we can attack again? He's still preparing for the next round. And for him, it's not only a matter of security, it's also a matter of politics, because he needs he needs to be able to start a war at any point in order to stay in power longer. So I think my own assessment is that the Iranian regime is going through a change of doctrine. It's not that it's going to completely abandon its network of allies, but they're not going to be the main backbone. They're going to be like a secondary, like spoilers, you can say, not the main doctrine. Because if you invest this much, keep in mind, like when did Pakistan get its J-10Cs? I think 2022, 2023.
Yeah, around that time, yes.
And the war was in 2024. Sorry, the war was in 2025. So 2 years.
5 years, May.
So that's how long it takes between you getting them and.
Of course, you have to. So Pakistan, I'll give you an example. So Pakistan is able to use Western and Eastern rigs because the system that we're running them on is a domestic software that we developed. So we're able to manage all of these things. And right now, India, because they have such a big spread of Russian and European and American jets, and as well as native air defenses, they're not able to integrate their systems well. So that's why they had this huge bungle up in May, with so many of them, with 3 of the jets being taken down, and then 1 Russian, and then 1 Israeli drone as well. I don't know if Iran has the time. I think the whole race here is against time for Iran
it's a matter of time, yeah.
Develop a domestic, sort of a domestic knowledge on how to operate these rigs, and then to have them work in sync with each other, and then Israel sort of preparing for its strike back. You're absolutely right that the American regime is hell-bent on trying to avoid any further escalation, because they have certain domestic policy goals, and then they want to focus on China, and they want to focus on Russia and the Eastern Front, and blah, 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 blah. And maybe Trump doesn't want to be seen as, Israel's sort of whipping boy. We already see that this whole Jeffrey Epstein scandal is going completely south for this regime.
Yeah. It's going to get worse. It's getting worse.
It's getting worse for them. So they need to, and they need to come up with something fast, because they need to allay the fears of the anti-war, anti-immigration voters who are also very deep anti-Semites, by the way, the allies of Israel. And we do see a shift, by the way. Me personally, I see a shift of allowing an increasing amount of anti-Semitism and nationalism at home, but still supporting in terms of foreign policy the Israeli Zionist entity. It's a very weird sort of balance that they're trying to maintain. In fact, that balance goes well for the Zionist regime, because they're desperate for the trillions of dollars that the Jewish American community has. They're desperate for that re-immigration. They really want that.
Someone described it as they hate Jews, but they love Israel. And this is actually, you might think of it as strange, but actually it's not, because if you think about it, Israel is the model for the kind of state they want to create. They want a state which is ethnic, militant, unapologetic, and based upon where religion basically is the spine. So that's the kind of white nationalist, Christian nationalist America they want. So like for them, Israel is an example, as a model for what they want. But at the same time, they hate.
It's like when Hindutva people are touting how ISIS is really, look the Muslims, look what they've done with here in Hindutva. There is almost like almost a love hatred they have for ISIS and Al Qaeda, where they're like, look, they're so impressive. They've built the kind of state they want, and why can't we do that with? In fact, they'll point to the more religious, the characteristics and failures of the Pakistani state, and say, we could be like this.
I mean, I'll tell you more. I was, when I came to Norway in 2014, I between 2014 and 2015, I was in the refugee camp here in Norway I was the only Palestinian, so it was all Syrian refugees who were coming from northern Syria. And I remember a lot of them were actually left Syria not because of Assad, but because of ISIS and the ISIS militants and the allied militants. And what was really interesting to me is that some of them, they hated ISIS, but also were impressed by ISIS. At the same time, they're like, we hate them. They did this to our family. They did this but at the same time, we're impressed that they were able to organize themselves in a way that others couldn't. So I can see that.
Yeah. So there's like almost like a religious envy in the Christian nationalist movements for an ISIS or for an Al Qaeda or for an Israel, where they see like a lesser reflection of themselves in it, that's where they want to be, and you're seeing this is my conspiracy. You gave it to us in the start, but the Pakistanis, all these characters, these Tucker Carlson, these Candace Owens, these Nick Fuentes characters that are somehow becoming mainstream, and Facebook isn't deplatforming them, and Instagram isn't deplatforming, and then Twitter, the Overton window in America is shifting to the very far right. And even Donald Trump's base is out trumping Trump. They're out MAGAing Trump now.
It's a movement now.
It's a movement now.
Yeah.
Back in the day, it was always BS in America. This is a movement. This movement has deep intelligence connections. I met some. I'll tell you a really funny anecdote, and this is not conspiracy. This is what I heard from my own ears and eyes. I have had the pleasure to host some really crazy European right-wing nationalists, like Christian nationalists, psychopaths, like real psychopaths. They're fun to hang out with. It's funny. We do the back and forth. They think we're in the Crusades or whatever. We let them imagine it, and we're a nice host to them. Many of them, multiple of them, have told me very openly that European intelligence is closely in touch with them, and they give them, and they show them the same kind of dreams that Muslim intelligence communities showed Al-Qaeda types and ISIS types 20 years ago, 30 years ago, that, oh, we're going to do this with Kashmir, and we're going to do this with Afghanistan, and we're going to do that with Bosnia, and then we're going to do this with Chechnya. So they have the same kinds of delusions, obviously limited to the scope of the UK or wherever these people are from, France, Italy, Germany, whatever, that it's going to be a beautiful Christian nation, and we're going to get rid of all the immigrants, and we're going to go to... So they feed them into this. So there is an ecosystem which is being sustained, in my personal belief, by the intelligence community in Western Europe and in America, that is feeding into this new age Christian nationalism, and that is very happily marrying with the anti-war effort, and I don't know what the Americans are going to do with that.
Yeah, so in my reading, what's happening is not only a polarization towards the right. What's happening is a collapse of the center. So,
Yes.
for example, you look at the United States right now. You see that the centrists are losing, but then the far right and the far left. I would say far right, far left is really relative terms.
In terms of, and aesthetics, by the way, it's also aesthetics.
In a sense that, for example, the Democrats, but I live in Norway. The centrist Democrats would be center right in Norway. Not like they're center left, because when we say right and left, where is the center? So these are relative terms. They don't.
So Mamdani would be like a center right guy in Norway.
Sorry.
So Mamdani and AOC would be like center right people in Norway.
No, they would be center left. They would be center left.
They would be center left in Norway.
What I would say is that they're like in the United States, they're like far left, but over here they'll be like, oh, this is normal. This is the normal,
like liberal politics.
social contract. Yeah, exactly. Completely usual politics. There's nothing radical about their politics in Norway, in a kind of Nordic welfare state, democracy kind of
context.
So Bernie Sanders, when he started, he's like, he pointed to Denmark as an example of democratic socialism, etc. But it's true, there is this Nordic model which is actually very close to. It's a working model, as like it is a working model, but it's not exactly. I don't know if. I don't know if you can call it capitalistic, but of course it is capitalistic, but they managed to.
It's functional capitalism.
Yeah,
it has enough public welfare and social safety nets and checks and balances. Like even in Germany, I was reading the other day that beyond the certain size, the firms have to have equal representation from the union, the labor union of that firm, on the board. So there are mitigating checks from Central Europe all the way to the Scandinavia. You have some mitigating circumstances, with relative.
I'll tell you, like from Norway, from my point of view, it's not enough. I still think that capitalism is still a problem. I still think that capitalism is still a problem here, even here. But at the same time, we're comparing it to the States. The States is really an outlier. For a very long time, when I lived in the United Arab Emirates, I thought, oh, the West is the West. They're all the same, Now that I live in Norway, I can tell you that no, American culture is significantly different. Political culture and even like regular culture is significantly different. And there was a period of time in which like Europeans were enthralled by American culture. I think after the waves of right-wing populism, and right now, really, like what we're seeing right now with this administration is that this administration is anti-Europe, like openly anti-Europe, and Europe, unfortunately, is unable to stand up for itself. It's unable to say that it's unable to actually stand for its own security, like their own sovereignty. But anyway, different topic. We were talking about the right and the left in the States, and I was telling you that the center is collapsing. You will notice this also in European elections. So, for example, you see that in France, there was a chance, like basically everybody was freaking out that wait, the far right is going to win. But who was the one who was the alternative? What was the far left? And they managed to basically put together a coalition to stop either of them of coming into power. The same thing as the Netherlands. The Netherlands has this very vile kind of anti-Islam guy who's like currently his party I think is the biggest. I'm not sure if it's still the fact, but I think it's the biggest in
Geert Wilders.
Yeah,
he's very popular in Pakistan.
So here's the thing, because the coalition is far right, but the opposite, the second is basically also it's basically left. The same thing in Spain, same thing in Belgium. So like what we're seeing really is the collapse of the center. I think the biggest political story and political energy going forward is that the center has lost. We're kind of seeing it happen in the United Kingdom as well. I think like reform is actually growing. Labour also it seems like it's a center right party, not a center left party. But again, this is like a historical. I think this is there's a framework that I use a lot that I kind of got or adapted from Ibn Khaldun. Ibn Khaldun, of course, spoke about cycles of time, and this is like his theory of cyclical time is based upon the Quran. تلك الأيام نداولها بين الناس. Basically, God circulates power among people in generations. Ibn Khaldun, of course, 700 years after the Hijrah, he developed this into a philosophy of history. If there is a way to look at this as you have political time. Political time is like crisis time. It's like 10 years, 5 years, 4 years, the age of an administration. If you're living in political time, all you want to know is like visibility. You want to be the center of attention. You want to be in the middle of the room. It's all about power. It's not really about transformation. It's about it's structurally conservative because it's if you have power, you get more done. And then you have historical time. Historical time is when things actually change, and that's 3 generations. Like a cycle of 3 generations. And we're at the end of one cycle, another cycle is starting. In other words, a lot of the post-World War II structures are collapsing. They're collapsing, and this is why the center is collapsing. And so this is the time for visionaries. This is the time to start thinking, how do we imagine the next cycle? And then, of course, there's cosmological time or cosmic time, which is prophetic time, eons, prophets, etc. The last time a complete cosmology was presented to the world was Islam. This is why, Islam openly says, this is the last message to humanity, the last complete message to humanity. And there were basically spiritual movements, etc. after that, but they're not a complete cosmology. So we have to think, maybe cosmological time is not really that important when in this particular conversation, it's always in the background. But think in terms of historical time, political time. We have to live in historical time because we cannot win in political time. Political time only favors who's already powerful. So if we are constantly pulled into political battles, where the only thing basically is who has more followers, who has more money, who has more guns, etc. Generally, we're going to lose. And not only are we going to lose, we're going to take away energy that should go into the next cycle of history, the next historical cycle. So I think this is a good framework to keep in mind. I kind of forgot what we're talking about because we're talking about the collapse of the center. And what I'm saying is, it's a sign. It's a sign that there's a cycle of history that's ending. There's a cycle that has to start. There's a limbo in between. Paradigms break before they shift.
So if we get caught in the political cycle, we would be, because we're in a flux, like you mentioned, liberal institutions are collapsing. Whatever was set up post World War II, that whole framework, that whole ecosystem is being reflected in the collapse of the center in electoral politics. And if we get caught up in that, in the times of flux, there is much chaos, and those with power crush those without. We would waste a lot of energy, a lot of potency in simply reacting to the 5, 10, 15, 20 year security period where things are going to change. the real room here is for thinking about the next three generations, which is at least 150 years, considering the age spans and the way they've become. It's 100 or 200 years actually, because now people don't live to like 40 or 50; they live to 70, 80, 90, 100, whatever. So the vision. So when it comes to Pakistan, for example, our whole security apparatus is stuck in the 5, 10, 15 year, like in Urdu we would call it time tapana, to get to flip time. That's what they're concerned with, the budget, the balancing, we're dealing with the Indians at the border, and then, oh, Israeli drones have come to the border. That was new. Why is Israel threatening us? The Abraham Accords are at hand, and what have you. Whereas we should be envisioning the next 100 to 200 years for South and Central Asia, because that is where we're sort of geographically limited to. And that whole scenario, when we map it on Syria and Palestine and the Sham, like you were saying before the recording started, I don't see Israel lasting through this for 10, 15 years. And like I meant, yeah.
And to be completely honest, like what really bothers me, to like what keeps me awake at night really is, like, you've seen, for example, the clashes in Syria right now with Druze. So there was like coastal massacres in March. And then you have right now also massacres in the south in Suwaida. And the pattern is almost very similar, because in the coastal massacres in March, there was a big report published by, I think there was a report by Reuters, and there's another report, I can't remember who published it, but they spoke to like 110 survivors or something, and they put together a timeline. And the pattern is matching closely with what, at least so far, I'm seeing with like what is the sequence of events in Suwaida. And it's that there was an attack by anti-government, so in the coast, basically Alawite militants who were associated with the Assad regime. So basically, this was a counter-revolutionary attempt by elements of the Assad regime who wanted to reestablish, destabilize the government and reestablish some kind of Alawite zone. And so what they did is that they attacked. It was a very well organized. It wasn't just a clash. It was very well organized attack on pro-government security personnel in that region. So what happened after that? Of course, they killed a lot of people. They killed a lot of. I think, if I remember correctly, they even killed some Alawites who were considered like not loyal enough with them. And then there was this backlash where a lot of pro-government, or at least government allied, I don't think, some of them were actually with the government, and some of them were actually not really, they're militants, but they're not really with the government, but they're like kind of like aligned with it, attacked the coast and again committed a lot of massacres. So basically it was a retribution, reprisal, It seems also in the south to be something similar. That was like this pro-Israel or Israel-backed Druze militia who are, openly calling for Israeli protection of the Druze, etc. By the way, they're not separatists. They simply want a protectorate zone. They don't really have majority support among the Druze. A lot of the Druze actually were pro-revolution and very active in the revolutionary movement. Even before, they were like, a lot of them were anti-Assad, and Assad actually killed some Druze leaders. So because they have Israeli support, they were able to cause a lot of havoc, a lot of cause a lot of trouble in Suwaida, and then they attacked government soldiers, and then again there was this reprisal, similar pattern. So when I see this, I see like that when these things happen, when these incidents happen, there's no there's collective punishment. There's like you killed us, we're going to kill you. We're not going to go and see, have you been the person? So there's no like tracing to say, am I killing the person who actually hurt me? No, you are from this group, I'm going to kill you. You're associated with them, that means you're this, right? And this is, of course, where the government itself has to step in. The government itself has to say, there's going to be like some kind of accountability, transitional justice, etc. I think Ahmed al-Shara, president of Syria, he just received the report. So there was the kind of a very deep investigative report made by the government about the March events, the coastal events, and I think it's only yesterday or the day before that he received the official report, and it's mentioned that there's some kind of process going on. Even before that, you had like the events in the south as well, which is like really, really distressing. So anyway, I look at that, and I look at Palestine, and I look at October 7th, and I look at what happens when Palestinians are able to break out of their cage. Fundamentally, I think October 7th was basically a hostage-taking operation that went south, that went wrong. Why? Because the Israeli army collapsed. And so what happened is that suddenly you have all of these militants, some of them actually not with Hamas, some of them basically just militant groups from. Suddenly they're like, oh, the Israeli army has collapsed. And then they go into the nearest, civilian area in Israel, and they just go berserk. It's the same. I see the same logic. Like, you are Jewish, that means you are that means you killed us, we kill you. The same kind of sectarian kind of reprisal logic, and that just kind of makes me think. I know that Israel is not going to last forever. This is not only a matter of analysis on sustainability, etc. It's also part of our Islamic understanding of history. Dawla in Arabic means Dawla is state, but it also means that circulates. Tadawul in Arabic means circulation. So the idea, like the paradigm, the Muslim paradigm, the Islamic, the Quranic paradigm is no state lasts forever. And states, as they go on, because power concentrates, they start to become more oppressive. And when they become oppressive, they incite or they inspire their own resistance. And when Ibn Khaldun was writing this, he was looking at the Umayyad dynasty and how it went corrupt, and then the Abbasid dynasty came, and then they went corrupt, and then etc. etc. He's looking basically at this churn. So we look at Israel, and I'm thinking, my God, the end of this can be like a bloodbath, an absolute bloodbath. Keep in mind also, Israelis, like 7 million Israelis, a lot of them are very armed, and I don't.
They have the eschatological kind of crazy religious zeal as well. So if it goes south, they would react in all sorts of ridiculous massacring manners.
I mean, this morning I was like, I woke up and say the dua and then meditate a little bit, and I'm thinking, like, what happens to the psyche of people? Because I'm looking at like statements from Israeli settlers about how they're like cheering about what's happening in Gaza. And I'm thinking, what happens when within a space of 10, 15 years, people who are this arrogant are broken? Like their power is broken. What happens? What happens to their psyche? And I mean, it's a completely different conversation. And to be completely transparent with you, I don't want to see massacres in post-Israel Palestine. I don't want to see another massacre of Jews. I think, however angry we can get, we can recognize that if trauma replicates itself, then we're just replicating, we're just waiting for the next disaster to happen. And in the end, as Palestinians, we want a country we can live in. We want a country which we can develop. And
yeah, you don't want a cursed territory which is littered with the blood of civilians. And I get it. So here's the thing. Here's the $1 million question, and it's been attempted once or twice in history. How do you break out of the cycle? Is it truth and reconciliation on the cards? Did that even work in South Africa? Is South Africa a good example? What is the arbitrary line of settling, which is, and again, this might sound delusional to a lot of people in the audience, like, what are you guys talking about? Israel is so powerful and blah, blah, blah. But it's going to happen. It might even happen in our lifetimes very soon. What is the arbitrary line of, is it third generation settlers? Is it second generation settlers who get to stay? Will there be tribunals? Will people be forgiven as long as they state their crimes? Like, do we even have a model to prosecute such a reconstitution of a country that once was Palestine,
I mean, I'll give you my answer, and then I'll also tell you why the answer doesn't matter. My answer really is that it's not really a matter of how long they have been there. So, for example, I think it's a piece of information that maybe a lot of people don't realize, because we associate the structures, the institutions of the State of Israel was created by European Jews based upon European structures. But then by the 1970s, 1980s, the majority of Jewish Israelis were already mixed. because a lot of the Jewish demographic came actually from the Middle East. There was like 700 to 800,000 Palestinians who were expelled in the Nakba. There was also an equivalent number of Arab Jews who were also who either were expelled or moved to Palestine. So by now, about 2/3, I think it's more than 2/3 of all Israeli Jews have some mixed Middle Eastern heritage. So, for example, Ben Gvir, who's like this fascist, really, far right ally of Netanyahu, and he has his own political aspirations, and I think is actually getting more popular in Israel. He's actually Iraqi Kurdish Jew, like he's a descendant from Iraqi Kurds. Smotrich, for example, who's also like religious Zionist, etc., and like really far right. He has some of his ancestry goes back to Palestinian Jews, like going back 150 to 100 years. At the same time, I have a friend, she's Israeli Jewish. She doesn't even call herself Israeli. She says, I'm a Palestinian Jew. She's an anti-apartheid activist. She was beaten. Her hand was broken. She was like, there's videos of her protecting Palestinians against ethnic cleansing in Musafir Yatta. And she doesn't have Palestinian roots. Like she doesn't have Middle Eastern roots. I think like half. I think one of her parents is like Arab Jew, the other or Turkish or something, and the other is Romanian or something.
Eastern European, right?
Yeah. So if we make it like, oh, how many generations you've been here? Well, a lot of these people, they've been here for generations, or at least they have roots. They can root.
But they're still psychopaths.
But they're still exactly, and there are also people who are not like they've been here for like 2-3 generations. They don't have like long roots, but they are willing to say that we don't want to be part of a settler colonial state, and we want to live in equality as as Jews, but not as colonizers,
as Israelis, right?
Yeah, we should. That's why we should be very careful when we say that. Okay, is it settlers? I'll tell you the difference between a settler and a migrant. The settler always he never integrates. He doesn't like for example. This is an example from northern Africa, because there was also French settler colonialism in Algeria and also in Morocco. When they would come, they would not exactly. They were already.
Still is in Morocco.
Sorry?
Still is in Morocco.
Sorry, still is, yeah.
The Moroccans wouldn't like that, but they don't watch this show.
So what I wanted to say is that when settler colonists come to an area, it's not like they migrate and they live under your rules. They create their own political order and they segregate themselves from you.
At the minimum, they create enclaves and cantonments and sort of these little protectorates within the territory, and that's where they live, and they have their colonies. And
this is what Tel Aviv was like. My father was born in Jaffa, and then to the south of Jaffa there was this area which was not developed, and so they built Tel Aviv to the south of Jaffa. No, it's not like they said, okay, we're going to come and live among you. We're going to rent some land to me, or I'm going to build it. It's not that they're trying to integrate. They're trying to separate themselves. That's settler colonialism. That's what settler colonialism is. That's what they do. I forgot what we were talking about before. So
we were talking about how I said that what will be the arbitrary system by which you decide who gets to stay and participate. And you mentioned that people with long heritages could be psychopaths and these crazy settler types. And then you wanted to distinguish between the type of settler and type of immigrant who is integrating and then who is creating an enclave for oppression.
But let me take it forward, because we were talking about transitional justice as well. And recently, like really, as I'm trying to process the death of my own father and like my own process of grief and guilt, etc., I started to read a lot about guilt and grief and the role of justice in this, because a great trauma was inflicted upon my family, and that was part of the story of my father's death. Not to mention it here, but people can go online and can read about this, etc. But one thing
for context, can you? Because Pakistani audiences, you could be new. For context, if you're comfortable and if it's not too much of an emotional burden, could you give some context?
So, I mean, I lived with my family in the United Arab Emirates. Grew up, born and raised in the Gulf region. My father was a cardiologist. Worked in the United Arab Emirates for 40 years. Was one of the first Arab professionals to come to the country when it was really empty almost. And in 2011, I became an activist in the Arab Spring Uprising. 2014, I was arrested and asked to leave the country. I'm Palestinian, so I have nowhere to go. Anyway, like within that process, my father, the shock of seeing that his son is arrested and I cannot help him and I don't know what's going to happen next. My wife at the time was pregnant. His mind started to slip. Like he had this PTSD plus burnout, etc., and started to slip. And because this was a result, at least a consequence, I don't want to say a result, it was a consequence of my activism and my voice, etc. Of course, I carried a lot of guilt because after that, for 10 years, my father was like declining slowly, and he passed away in 2024 last year. And by the end of it, he was not verbal. I was also separated from them for a number of years because of threats against my life, etc. So the decline of my father and the fact that he couldn't see what I became. My career had like a boost in the middle, but like he was declining at the same time. At the same time, the sense of no closure, but also the sense of displacement, because my father was born in Jaffa. I became a Norwegian citizen in 2 years ago, but he died as a refugee. He died as a stateless refugee, and he died in Canada. So all of this together made this, a very. I felt broken after it. I felt like it's not only the death of a father, but really, there's so much I need to process. So I ended up reading a lot about grief and justice, and whether it's from like different traditions, Islamic tradition, or even like I even read something about the Buddhist tradition, etc. And what I can tell you right now about transitional justice is that if you don't grieve, if you don't mourn, you're not ready for justice. Justice and grief are entangled with each other. You asked about South Africa, and one of the most beautiful scenes. I was like in my this was 1990s, I think 94, 95, when the Truth and Justice Commission was going on in Africa. It was like this bishop called Desmond Tutu. I think he passed away. Who was like anti-apartheid, etc. And he was like, I was also very pro-Palestine, by the way. And there was this very beautiful scene I remember where the point is like the truth has to come out. We have to, and everybody who has been hurt can come to this commission and just say, this is what happened to me. This is what they did to me. The truth has to come out, and people just deal with it. I know you don't want to hear it. You're going to hear it. Deal with it. You're going to like scream. You're going to shout. You're going to cry. Do it. Because that's grief. That's the process of like letting it move through you. And I remember this moment where like a woman, I think she was like starting to speak about what happened to her, and she started to choke up because it was so emotional. And then he stopped the proceedings, started to sing. Just like the whole room singing. And I remember how beautiful it is just like to recognize that this is not just an intellectual process. This is also a somatic process. This is an emotional process. I think that the South African transition or Truth and Justice Commission was not complete. It was a good start. It's something that we can build upon, but it's not a perfect model, because South Africa right now is the most unequal country in the world. It's like the most highest inequality in the world. So like maybe they had the right intentions, they tried to do the right thing, but also capitalism captured their economy, and that's why we need to also think about, how do we tackle inequality in the future. But absolutely, truth, justice, and reconciliation, that should be a part. I'm hoping that such a process starts in Syria. I think it's very, very important, and I think this is something we need to invest in the future also for Israel-Palestine. It doesn't mean excusing anyone. It means accountability. It doesn't mean really that. So it sits in between saying, hey, just continue with your work. How can you continue with your lives when there's so much injustice has been done? And there has to be justice. There has to be accountability. But at the same time, you don't want to go towards like massacres and bloodshed and sectarian killings and uncontrolled reprisals, etc. So we need to be, like you said, it might be crazy for us to be saying this right now, but in my analysis, Israel is not going to live to see its 100th year. And 100 years is not that far. It's like, it's like less than 25 years to come. This is within our lifetimes. We need to be thinking now.
Like you also said something very cynical about 20 minutes ago. You said that I'll tell you what I think ought to happen, and I think it was very kind of you to share
It doesn't matter. Yeah.
your personal. Yeah, it was very kind
Why
of
it
you to
doesn't
share your
matter?
personal. Sorry, I was. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I was just commending you on sharing your personal your traumas with your father and your relationship, and mentioning how moved and touched you were by the South African attempts at something potentially very noble and unique in human history. With how successful as it was, can be debated. Um, and of course, you carry a lot of that trauma and guilt. But I just want to say on behalf of the audience as well that, in Pakistani culture, we have a culture of the literal saying is "miti pao." It just means put dirt on it, and then it's followed up with roti choti khaiye. Maybe you should eat some bread. What that means, I don't know how to explain the cultural nuance to you, but I just hope that you're able to put some dirt on it, and that we can break bread in a much better world, inshallah. I know Pakistan is not very good with this trauma stuff. We're like we just
No, I think it's a problem really. It's a problem with human history really, because we don't want to grieve. Really, like this is my. People don't want to grieve, and when they don't want to grieve, you get revenge because we have pain and we don't know what to do with the pain, and so it comes out as anger.
Yeah.
Really, what you need to do is to grieve. We need natural mourning. There are wounds inflicted on Pakistan 75 years ago that hasn't been mourned, and that's why they continue. Afghanistan is an excellent example of that. Iran is a good example of that. So this is it's a different conversation. But earlier I said I'm going to also tell you why it doesn't matter. It's true that, we need to think about this. See, the thing is, colonialism is defined by power gap. Any abuse actually is defined by power gap. The reason why colonizers can do anything they want to the colonized because there's a big power gap in between. Even with domestic abuse, for example, when it comes to like someone who's abusing their children or their wife, etc., it's because there is a big power gap, and because someone is powerless, you can do anything to them. In the end, if you the main decolonization work, people think decolonization work is like getting the powerful to act differently or to act nicer. That's not true. Decolonization work is power building work. You need to bridge the gap, because if you bridge the gap, power relationships are very sensitive to the gap itself. In fact, for example, if Israel, there's someone actually, a friend of mine commented yesterday, I tweeted something about how Israel's unsustainable, this kind of where it's very dependent on the West, but also very hegemonic and very, very, revengeful and militant. And he said, the thing is, if not for the support it gets for the West, Israel would have to act like a normal country. It would have to actually be diplomatic, etc., etc. So it's true. As the power gap reduces, there are things that you can't do anymore. You need to act differently. The relationship has to change. So I say it doesn't matter. I say it actually matters, and we have to think about it. But in a way, it doesn't matter because our main energy now should be on power building. We need to close the gap. We need to become more powerful, and we need to degrade their power as well. But mainly, we need to become more powerful, and we need to understand power. A lot of the work that's coming, it's coming maybe late in the conversation, but we're working on launching a big platform, me and my team. It's a platform we say that we want the platform to live in historical time or on the edge between historical and political time. So we want to be thinking about long-term stuff. But yeah, one of the things that we want to talk about is this this particular.
Ayad, brother, is there power building in Syria via Turkey? Is because when we talk about Palestine, you have to have a Misr and a Syria or a Sham in the situation. Is that power building? There's so much skepticism and cynicism, which I share. When I look at the Shara regime, when I look at the people around him, when I look at the Ikhwan style, Mursi style posturing that, if we keep Obama happy, if we dance around the American regime somehow, and it ends in collapse and chaos, and God forbid, there's no Egyptian military to fill the vacuum. In the case of Syria, there is no option for failure. Otherwise, it's God forbid. I don't share the same views as it's always been CIA and it's always been the Mossad, and I think it's a much more nuanced situation. But even with that nuance, is because that power bridging is not just existential for the Palestinians, for Syria as well. Is that, yeah, for the whole region. I mean, Saudi wouldn't like to see Syria collapse. Turkey wouldn't like to see Syria collapse. We so far away from in Pakistan, of course, not for political reasons, maybe entirely, but also for just personal, human, religious reasons, but also politically. The Pakistanis have fully, since we developed the nuclear program in the late 80s, this is the first time Israel has directly attacked or tried to attack our mainland again. And in the Pakistani, security state's consciousness, this was a thing that they thought they were done with since the war on terror. We're a non-NATO ally. Israel stays over there. We stay over here. Our nuclear capabilities, the range doesn't go to Israel. It does, but it doesn't go to Israel. And we're focused on the Bay of Bengal, and we're focused on the Indians, and you stay all the way over there. But that all the way over there has now come to the Iranian border. It's in the Balochistan, it's in the Sistan, it's over the air in Tehran, right? So now, in the Pakistani security state's imagination also, they need Syria to stand. Whether or not they have the impetus and the pragmatism, or I doubt they do. By the way, we've been very non-serious about Syria in terms of foreign policy, even after the revolution. But do you see it in Syria? Because you can't make someone do something they don't have the drive for. Do you see the in Urdu you would say, do you see the jarasim? Do you see the germs for for the right kind of fermentation in Syria?
So I'll first start by mentioning that you're right that if Israel actually manages to take out the regime in Iran or the nuclear program, Pakistan is next, no doubt about it. I think I might have caught some. I mean, I'll have to check my database to see, like, maybe they actually said something.
Yes, they did. There were some Tel Aviv professors, from security professors, some intellectuals in the media, and some ministers as well, who have made vague allusions or direct, threats to Pakistan or the Pakistani nuclear apparatus, at least. And Turkey is also on that list. It's always mentioned as a.
So I mean, I mentioned. I mean, I don't know if we mentioned this in the previous recording, or I don't know what. But something I think I mentioned before, that Israel's new security doctrine is basically, we don't trust you unless we can destroy you. Like, this is it. It's security through domination. So they're not going to stop having wars. The moment they eliminate a threat, they're going to go to the next threat. This is it. And of course, the cycle is that every time you do that, you actually create new threats. But going to your question about, like, power building in Syria. The first thing to mention is that there is a very big difference between Egypt and Syria here, because Egypt had an orderly, more or less orderly transition compared to the Syrian example, because what really happened was there were elections, the army was, the state institutions endured, so the change of governance really was still under the same, constitution, the constitution changed, etc. So Morsi had a democratic mandate. And yes, he, I believe that the main mistake that the Muslim Brotherhood did basically was to overestimate their own. They thought that their legitimacy alone is enough, their democratic legitimacy alone is enough, and they broke away with the pro-revolution camp. So there was, like, events in late 2012 called the Mohammed Mahmoud events. Where really it marked the fracture of this. Like, basically in 2011 and during the uprising, there was, like, many forces against Mubarak, and the Muslim Brotherhood was only one of them. And the Muslim Brotherhood acted after it got power in a way that actually fractured that coalition. It needed that coalition. But that said, Morsi didn't really have the time to implement a program. It was like less than a year that already it was very clear they wanted him gone. In the case of Syria, of course, the collapse of the Assad regime is complete. It's complete. First of all, the Assad regime was already completely hollowed out even before it fell. It almost fell under its own weight. It wasn't exactly, like, broken. It was like a stump of a tree that was already eaten by termites from inside, and someone just, like, knocked on it, it fell. And I think I mentioned 2016, I wrote a tweet saying that, this regime cannot last a week if not for Iranian and Hezbollah support, or Russian support, Iranian and Russia support. And then the moment these happen, is going to fall, and that's what happened. On the question of power building, I don't. I'm not the right person to speak about the internal. Like, maybe you need to speak to a Syrian, to someone who really understands that. But my own perspective, at least this is what came to my mind, was the difference. It seems to me that the government right now is really focused on economic factors, on making sure that the sanctions are gone. This is actually a very, very big win. Making sure that they can reconstruct. The country is destroyed. Like 80% of the country. There are parts of Syria, large parts of Syria, that look like Gaza right now, like completely destroyed. And the destruction is not just infrastructure destruction; people are destroyed. The trauma is deep. The basic infrastructure. You're talking roads. You're talking it's a country that still needs nobody. Right, to be completely honest, very few people right now in Syria are thinking about democratic rights or political rights. They're just thinking how do we make sure that everyone has electricity, children can go to school, and at least life can go on, a certain kind of stable life can go on. So I completely understand that the focus should be how do we build this country, how to rebuild the country, and also on international recognition to make sure that people are invested. All of these, no government in the region is going to try to undermine this transition. And I think, like you mentioned, very, very, you summarized it very well, that no country in the region, probably except Israel, wants this transition to fail.
It seems even the Americans don't want it to fail. No, it's because the regime is CIA, right?
Well, it's not because it's really because the breakage of Syria was such an enormously traumatic event in geopolitics. Think about it in 2016. When did you have the biggest flow of refugees in Syria? It was 2014, 2015, around the same time that I became a refugee. ISIS came, 2014 was the refugee crisis, 2015 was ISIS. Also, because of the flow of refugees to Europe, you had the rise of the far right. Europe at the time when I came to Norway, it was refugees are welcome. We have parties of Europeans welcoming refugees. Germany opened this, it was the previous government, and was we're going to take in 1 million. Just come here, you're going to be safe. And then right after that, there was this backlash, the far right backlash, and Brexit was part of that move, that thing, and then Trump's election was part of that thing. So it completely destabilized. Not only Syria was destabilized, it really broke a lot of things in the world, and I don't think anybody wants that again.
I think it kind of broke Western democracy.
Yeah, absolutely. And nobody wants it again. But at the same time, there is also a fear that we want to make sure that Iran and the Iranian regime can never have that area again. Now, I think it's never going to have it. I don't think it's ever going to be able, that land bridge, like I said, it's gone. And I think, like I said in the beginning of the conversation, I think they got the message that, this bridge is not going to reopen. We shouldn't even try. This is why I think I got into a dispute with some Syrians and others recently about who's the biggest threat to Syria going forward, and that's why I say that now I know historically the Assad regime had Russian and Iranian support, and the main enemy of the Syrian revolution was the Iran axis. But now, in this point, I think Israel is the biggest threat to it.
Okay, here's the thing. I think the Iranian, while you might see it as a binary of a 0 and 1, Iran is done, they're recalibrating their strategy, they're going to have to fight a war over the Gulf and their homeland, and so on and so forth. Iran is I describe it like a rocket boosting up to the stratosphere. First, it drops the fuselage, which is the Shabi, and then the Ansar Allah, and then the Hezbollah, and then Hamas, and slowly and steadily shedding all of its parts, the rockets reach the stratosphere. Now, when it's at the cusp, the Israelis have grabbed the rocket by the foot, and they're like, "Where are you going? You're not allowed to exit, into orbit. You're supposed to be down here with us in the dirt," and in that, it seems that they might abandon Syria or the project for all these proxies or allies altogether. However, there will still be some interference on some level. And I think the Syrian regime fears first off, they don't have the technical ability to engage Israel. air defenses wise. The Syrians, sorry, they don't have the technical ability to engage the Israelis. On top of that, if they engage with any of the Israelis or Israeli proxies that the Druze had been acting, they would be already in the media landscape and in the intellectual landscape. They're already facing resistance from the Axis and Iran. So that could turn into potentially a very dangerous two-front conflict for them. No.
Yeah. No, I mean, to rephrase your question, I'm not saying that Iran and Iran Axis will not be spoilers. I'm saying that in terms of threat potential, it's very obvious that Israel is the main threat. And it's also very obvious that Israel will not allow Syria to rebuild. It doesn't want. It's a security state. It's a existentialist state. It's a survivalist state. It doesn't want. And like I said, like in their media, they keep saying this. They keep look at capacity, not intent. Capacity, not intent. And a lot of the time they're pointing to Syria. We don't care how much you try to tell us that you don't have any bad intentions for us. So long you have a gun in your hand or you have power, we're going to go out and take it out. This is the Israeli mentality. This was the Israeli mentality in 1948, and this is now after October 7th has went into hyperdrive. This is how they think. But I want to go back to the question about power building, and I mentioned that they're focusing on international legitimacy and economic development, which is great, which is important. But my own, again, I'm leaning into my Islamic education. And I remember the story, for example, from the Quran about Talut and Jalut, and the example of ironically, it's actually is the Israelites at the time of the prophetic era of the Israelites, when there was a battle between the forces of the Israelites at the time who were basically the believers at the time with the
Philistines, yeah. The as described Philistines, who were the
I think
historically,
I think they're all Canaanites. They're all basically
Canaanites. Yeah, let's not get into the Twitter's enough. Twitter does enough of a DNA analysis on all of us. We can
The idea here is that you have this very clear verses in the Quran that says basically that Talut, who's the king, and he has Dawood, Prophet Dawood alayhi salam was part of the army. He's heading to battle, and he had a small army, and he's facing this very, very large army. And he's in this situation where he wants to make sure that his army is ready. You might think that army, like power here, like army is ready means best weapons. I want you guys to be completely like, you need to drink water, you need to be well fed, you need to like really be ready to. But look what he does. He's like, hey, we're going to pass by this lake. Don't touch it. Whoever drinks is not part of my army anymore. The maximum you can take is 1 gulp of water. And then he goes forward, and he has like his army, most of the army goes away. Like he has a smaller army. If you think about this in this kind of mentality, is like, why is he doing that? He's basically causing his own defeat. But then he goes on, and then they win the battle. And then there's, of course, the verse of the Quran about how many a time in history a small group has defeated a bigger group. Why? Like, if you think about it strategically, like, of course, we think of these things theologically, but sometimes we have to look at these verses and think like a strategist. Why? Because power building means coherence. The biggest thing that you can do to create more power is have a coherent, well-integrated core group. This is actually also from what's his name, Ibn Khaldun. Ibn Khaldun called it asabiyya, which means basically the coherence of the group. So this is where I look at Syria, and I'm like, okay, it's really good. It's really good that you have economic development, etc., etc. But then I mentioned this, I think, in the previous interview that we did together about how Syria is a country of many different groups, and all of these groups are native, they're local. We need that coherence. We need that coherence to build a strong core for this country. And I think a lot of Syrians are echoing this. A lot of I'm not saying something. First of all, I'm not saying something that's ahistorical. It's not something that basically applies in Syria and not in Syria. This applies everywhere in the world, and that's why I leaned on the Quran for it. But also, it's something that is echoed by a lot of Syrians. The main thing right now, I think, the main struggle is creating a core, a strategic coherent peoplehood in Syria. And that's the base of power building. The base of power building is really people. And that's why it's very distressing when you see when you see Syrians fighting each other. That is the biggest collapse of power building. It's the biggest collapse of power building. You need people to be together on the same page, and that requires wisdom. It requires a lot of wisdom, a lot of the thing is Syria. The Syrian majority was under the thumb for a very long time. They were oppressed for a very, very long time. There is something to do with the majority that has won. It has won, absolutely. Assad is gone. He's destroyed. He's not coming back. His regime completely vanished. You still need accountability. You still need to know what happened. You still need to know there are many people who are still missing, etc. Of course, that's also part of the process. But sometimes you win, but you don't realize that now you're the one in power.
Yeah, you're not the opposition anymore.
You're not the opposition anymore, and the kind of responsibilities that you have you're running the place now. You're running it.
Do they have already we've seen with the Alawites and the Druze, there have been problems, not totalizing problems. There are parts of the community within the Druze and within the Alawites. The core is obviously still with the regime and with the state and still believes in this new peoplehood of Syria. But do you see the symptoms in the regime to have that helm, to have that big brother? And I don't mean big brother in the negative sense. I mean to have that fatherly, to have paternal, maternal instincts of a state, to show that hikmah and wisdom and allow for this multiplicity of the Syrian peoplehood or identity. Do you see that?
This is what I'm waiting for.
I mean, in terms of posturing, Ahmed al-Shara has tried a lot. He's trimmed the beard, he's trimmed the mustache, the turban is gone. He's wearing a suit like any other, Arab democracy or some kind of Arab republic or state, and the aesthetics are all on point, and they're not enforcing religious sort of these would be seen as constricting sort of laws by a multicultural sort of this. It's high society Syria, as it's not, it's cosmopolitan. It's not a tribal Afghanistan, and so you haven't.
Syria is cosmopolitan by nature.
Well, of course, it's the heart for civilization for thousands and thousands of years. So that cosmopolitan nature is not being stifled. A lot of the ISIS and jihadist imagery is being shed off, and the aesthetics are there, but is the core there? Do they have the core ingredients for?
This is a question I don't have an answer for, but I am worried that in the events in the coast, or post events in the coast and post events in Sweden in the south, I worry that this regime thinks that unity will come by crushing the opposition rather than including, finding accommodation. And I don't mean opposition. By opposition, I don't mean the people who are pro Assad or pro Israel. I just mean the regular people. Because keep in mind that you're right that these are people. The majority in Syria had been oppressed for a very long time, but so were the minorities. The Assad regime really ruled in the name of minorities, but actually oppressed and crushed them all the time. And there is legitimate fear among minorities that says that we need protection. We need to be protected. Now, a lot of them say that the best protection for us is to be with the government and to be with Syrians as Syrians. But I'm worried. Let's just say I'm worried, and I hope that this is I hope that like I mentioned, that the report about the coastal massacres has just been delivered to the president's office and he acknowledged receiving it. I'm hoping that we'll be able to see some kind of really
punitive action and
accountability, to say this is a state for all Syrians. We are against all reprisal killings. This is a state where all Syrians, regardless who they are, whether they're Sunni or Shia or Alawite or Druze or Christian, etc., everybody belongs here. This is one coherent Syria, which as I said, this is the foundation of having of power building.
And the act of Irani and the Iranian axis of resistance and their sort of paradigm, their act as spoilers. Is it impacting Syrian society? Is it furthering divides, or is it just noise?
I guess this is a question to ask Syrians who have been to Syria and who have, who interact with them. But what I can tell you from what I notice is that the trauma runs very, very deep. The trauma, the sense of betrayal at Hezbollah is so deep. I remember my best friend back in the UAE was Syrian, and I remember when he went back, like 2006, after there was a war between Hezbollah and Israel in 2006. Just the amount of support, popular support, like Nasrallah's pictures everywhere, including in like, it's not just basically people are Alawites. Everybody's like, okay, we're supporting this because fighting Israel, etc. And then the way that Hezbollah betrayed, like this is a feeling of betrayal and like deep. Like betrayal is one of the hardest feelings to get over psychologically. Because it's also moral injury. The way that Hezbollah backed Assad, the way that it felt like it's a stab in the back when it comes to Syrians, I don't think this trauma is going away. I don't think this trauma is going away soon. And I hope that, the right way to do it is really to start some kind of historical process of accountability and justice and truth and reconciliation. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, given also that there's 1,000 problems going, like you're in a Syria where every 1,000 problems that are there, and every day the problems get even worse. But I think this is why we need to. I think this is where the world can help and civil society can help. But as far as I can tell you, there is a very deep sense of betrayal at Iran and Hezbollah, and that's going to be generational, unfortunately. And that's why I say the biggest mistake that the Iranian regime and Iranian Axis did in 20 years, the biggest strategic, not only moral obscenity, but also the biggest strategic mistake they did was to support Assad.
All right, we've made sure that the Pakistani Shia community, as well as Axis supporters in the left in Pakistan, will hate you and I. Thank you so much for your time, Iyad. I'll see you in the comment section. I know that you've been working for the CIA / Mossad / ISIS / Al Qaeda for a long time, and this was basically my debut interview. Did I make the cut?
I think you did. Yes.
All right. Thank you very much.
Good CIA agent.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Iyad, for your time, and I love seeing you smile, and I love making you laugh, because it's a well-deserved break from the absolute horror show that we have around us. I hope that Muslims can find themselves living in somewhere in between historical and political time. I think that's a very good distinction that you've made. It's been a learning for me as well. Thank you so much for your time, as always. It's lovely speaking with you. We make dua for you and your family, and for the people of the Sham and Palestine. Thank you so much, Iyad. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.